Hey everybody, and welcome to session 1 of Instructional Multimedia Design and Development. I'm making this video on Tuesday afternoon, January 19th around 3 p.m. I did get the module up a little after midnight, so about 1 in the morning Tuesday. And for that reason, I'm going to let you guys have through Tuesday, February 2nd, midnight, to do any of the work. The module, if you look at so let's go into the content module. Let's talk about a couple things in there. I did make you a checklist so you can click through these items as you complete them and save those items so you know what you've done. It gives you kind of a big picture of what you're doing in this session. But there's always the course plan on the welcome page of each module or each session module. And if you go in there, we can take a look at where we're at. And what I wanted to say was this graphic project, is not meant to be incredibly difficult and time consuming. If you've never, ever, ever, ever made anything graphical before, it might seem a little bit challenging, but you can make graphical things using PowerPoint, Paint.net, which most of you probably have never heard of, but it's a really great program that's free to download if you want to use it. And there's some online things that you can use as well. You have to be a little bit careful with the online things because they sometimes don't let you actually use the things you make. Like you couldn't use it to actually put on a website, for example. You have to be careful. You have to read their terms of use. But anyway, this project is not meant to be incredibly challenging. And this multimedia design journal setup shouldn't be too difficult. You're just putting together like a blog kind of thing. You're going to go initiate it and give me the link to it is really what you're going to do for that. And then this discussion here, it's also not too time consuming. It's just kind of trying to think a little bit in a little more focused way about multimedia and how it's going to be, how it can be of use to you and your audience. So with all of that said, I don't think that you'll necessarily need to take till Tuesday, February 2nd to do your work. I think you can probably get it in by January 31st. I don't care. I'm not trying to pressure you to do that. What I'm saying is that I don't think you're at a disadvantage if you were to just do this module in 12 days, for example. All right, so let's go on into the module and just take a look. Since this is a new class that I'm sort of building mostly from the ground up, it's going to be a little more spare in its details. If you've taken another class with me, you might have noticed that I write more and have more stuff, maybe more pages in a module. But for now, it's going to be pretty simple, and I'm going to welcome your feedback on things. If you don't understand, let me know because it's probably a sign that I need to fill in some gaps. So again, for this session, you're going to do the first discussion, session 1, why, what, and how multimedia. So you go in here, there's a reading, there's a video to watch. It's 15 minutes, but it does a fantastic job. We're reading this book, this e-learning book, the electronic one that you read in this class, might seem, I don't know, you might not connect with it. I think when you watch this video and you listen to Richard Mayer, excuse me, talk about multimedia learning, he really kind of gets to the essential points about it. I think that will actually help you read better and connect to it better after you hear him speak and after you hear him being interviewed. He does a good job of summarizing a lot of points from across that book. Another thing I want you to read is skim through about a little more than 10 pages of the Horizon Report, and I want you to go look for what the future holds in terms of multimedia, and then you're going to reflect on it a little bit and how you can use it in your own work. This becomes important later in this semester because you're actually going to be creating a multimedia artifact for a client, and that client could be like a teacher, a seventh grade life science teacher, for example. And during session 1, now that I've brought this up, and this is, we're talking about project 5 that comes at the very end, near the very end. During this session, session 1, I'm collecting all of the information that I need to make sure that that particular project is designed well, and that every project we do up to that point leads you to being able to be successful on project 5. So I'm learning from other professors that have taught this class. I'm getting their instruments, the things. There's a lot of details in this particular class because this class is an official assessment class in our program. It has, I think, 6 assessments that you guys that we have filled out that demonstrate your work and are major checkpoints in your overall program. So it's very detailed stuff, and I have to make sure I have it lined up properly. And so I'm meeting with previous professors to get all of that information, and so that I can make sure that your final project is appropriate and that it's that the measure that we use to rate your final project fits. So I'm working on that immediately, and I'll have details for you shortly about that. Definitely by the beginning of session 2, but hopefully sooner than that because I really want you guys to kind of start thinking about who might be a good client, and maybe you can start the conversation with them. So that's a priority for me to get that up for you. All right, so we've got some session 1 readings. Clark and Mayer, chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7, and Evers and Barron, chapters 2 and 5. Chapter 5 deals with authoring graphics, for instance. I think you might find that chapter to be useful to you, especially if you've never done anything related to that before. I don't provide a ton of tutorials or how-tos because there's so much out there and it depends on what tool you're going to use. Um, I don't know I'm not going to provide tutorials for 10 different tools. You're going to have to rely on yourself to kind of Google things. Um, it's amazing what you'll find when you do that. And, if you need help finding something, let us know. Let me and your peers know. Tell them on the peer-to-peer. Tell me through email. Between all of us, we can probably find it, but I want you to try first because you are leaders in instructional technology. And so people are going to turn to you in your school or your other setting for with these kinds of questions. So you need to grow those skills and figure out how to find stuff as well. I do give you some direction though for different tools you can use for the project 1. But we'll talk more about project 1 in just a second. Let's talk about this multimedia design journal. So there's a lot of really great multimedia principles in the e-learning textbook that you can use in this class and in other classes in your program. And rather than read this book and have it go in one ear out the other, I think that it's useful to have this design journal where you actually seek out examples of those principles that are being taught in the chapters that you're reading. So this is in the Clark and Mayer text particularly. So what you're going to do, let's go check out these instructions. And I have set this up. It's not a you can't edit this document, but you can comment on it. So if you highlight it and you right click it, you should have the comment option. So if you have a question about something, if something doesn't make sense, or if there's an area where I can add more information, you're welcome to comment in the margin. I'll probably get an email that says you've commented in the margin and that will pull me in, but you can also comment in the margin and then send me an email in Coursed-In if you want, asking me to clarify things as well. But what you're going to do is you're going to engage with and apply concepts from the course readings. You'll be doing this throughout the semester. So this is assigned here in session 1, and the Multimedia Design Journal will actually be due in session 7. It's worth 80 points. It's no small project. So it's due on April 24th. And going back to the instructions, you get to pick, you can set up a blog, a wiki, or a website, like a Weebly type of thing if you want. And what you're going to do is you're going to create entries. There's 20 entries I'm asking you to make. Each entry should have its own web page, which is why a blog is a really natural one. You just create a new post and boom, that's number 1. Wiki, you would create a new page and then you'd author on that page and then it'd be done. Website, same thing. You would create a new page. A blog may be the easiest sort of pre-built thing for you to use. Um, so you can pick and keep in mind that if you use Blogger, that's a university supported tool if you use your West Georgia login. And the benefit of that is if you were to make it private, you would still be able to share your blog with your design journal with classmates and that kind of thing. We also have wiki spaces through the university. You can use that. I recommend it just because it's university supported. We also have Google Sites, which I struggle with, but I use it for my own personal website. Um, that's also university supported. For each post, so I told you there's 20 posts, and I'll show you really quickly. Starting with the multimedia principle, going through the contiguity principles, modality, redundancy, coherence, personalization, segmenting, worked example, practice, learner control, thinking skills, and games and simulations. So there's a number of principles that are sort of taught in this book. And what I want you to do is after you kind of read about it and you look at the examples they provide, then I want you to go out on the web and I want you to find examples, just one for each of these principles. So there's like right here where it says worked example principle, choose one and choose another. There's more than two of them. There's like three or four of them. So you get to, for number 13, you can choose one of the principles, and number 14, choose another of the three or four. So what do you have to do for each of these entries? Well, you need to provide a screenshot of the principle in action, a descriptive URL where the example originated, like this is a descriptive URL, HILT, Principles for Multimedia Learning with Richard E. Mayer. This is not a descriptive URL right here. This thing is just an ugly raw URL. Again, let's do descriptive where you actually type what it is and then you link to that typed text. You need a brief definition of what the principle is in your own words, and an explanation of how the example does or does not meet the principle. So if you think about it, it could be a non-example. You could be like, okay, here's an example of some e-learning, and they almost maybe met this principle, but they didn't quite make it because the words are not near the graphic. So I made you an example last night. Let's see if I can find it. See an example. So I made an example of personalization principle number 1 on my old EDS blog. And so I showed you, so I titled my post Personalization Principle Number 1. Notice how it has its own address. There's nothing else on this except for Personalization Principle Number 1. I've got what it is. I have it defined here. What is the principle? How does this example show it or not show it? Here's a descriptive link to where it came from. And here's the screenshot. Finally, it's always good to throw a reference in there. I suggest you put Clark and Mayer into every one of your blog posts as a reference. And I actually see a mistake I made. I need to go in and put a page number right there because I did put quotes around it and I did cite the source, but I did not put a page number. So that is very bad, and I will go fix that in just a minute. I have to write this down. All right. All right. So this again is due at the end of the semester. Be sure you use your own words. Do not plagiarize. Make sure that you are familiar with how you quote sources. That's what's funny about this, right? Is that I need to go add my page number because you don't want anybody to think that you are like plagiarizing because you know better. We know better, okay? We all know better. So we know that when we are using someone else's idea, we need to either put quotes around it if it's their words exactly, or if it's their idea but it's in your words, you still need to cite it. And you can do that by putting their last name and the year of 2011, and then you put the source at the bottom. So this APA website, the OWL website, will show you how to do that. All right, let's go back into the course. So that's your multimedia design journal. Now, before I go to the graphic project, let me talk to you quickly about the entries. As of this session, through the readings you've done so far in Clark and Mayer, you actually can do the first 5 concepts of your multimedia journal, design journal. Okay, so I suggest you do that in an ongoing fashion and don't wait until the very end to do it. Another thing I want to make sure that you are aware of is that you don't sort of lambast or insult the examples that you see out on the web. If you're blogging about it and you're citing it out there, people could potentially see your blog post. So be incredibly tactful and professional. All right, so that's the Multimedia Design Journal. Now let's look at the Project 1 graphic. You may have noticed that across the projects 1, 2, 3, and 4, we have a graphic, we have a screencast, we have an audio project, and AV motion, and that will be video or animation or something or things like that. So we're growing in sort of multimedia qualities as we go through. The graphic one is perhaps the simplest. It's, multimedia is about sort of the overlapping of these different types of media. So we're starting pretty simple with graphic, and then we're going to slowly build. So let's go take a quick look at what we're doing in this project. So you're going to develop a graphical artifact using a digital tool like Paint, Paint.net, PowerPoint, the GIMP, Inkscape, Illustrator, or another program used for creating and manipulating images. What you're going to do is you're going to work on your personal brand. I provide articles on getting in the mood for thinking about your personal brand, which may seem entirely silly to you, but bear with me. This is something that lots of people in educational technology do. I do it. I'm not the best at it, but I I have made attempts, and so I think it's a good thing to practice and see what you think. Try it on for this assignment. So you're going to work on your personal branding. You're going to create a logo for your personal brand as a professional. Um, and it's really open as to how you do this. Okay, so go look at how companies brand themselves, how schools brand themselves, how people, how products are branded, what are the little images that are used, what symbols, numbers, what's the size of the image. It can vary. And just think perhaps this could be something that you put on your business card. It could go on your blog. It could go on your professional website. It could go on the stationery that you use. It could go in a number of places. So we're not going to worry about where this thing goes. Right now, you're just going to make something. Okay? In addition to making the logo, and here I give you some ideas for different ways you can do it. You can use a variety of visual media to get it into your computer. You're also going to write 1 to 2 paragraphs explaining how it symbolizes your brand and represents you and or the work you do. Also include a sentence about your design process, noting all the technology programs you used on the way to the final logo. So basically you create this logo, this image, graphical representation of yourself, and it is a representation of you. So that's it could be we can tell by looking at it what you are and what you do and what you're passionate about, but it could be we need a little bit of explanation. So that's what the 1 to 2 paragraphs are about. I'm also very interested in what tools you use. We are going to be building a toolkit this semester. I'm going to set up a Google Doc where we can put the tools that we use for graphic stuff, for audio, for finding free and open images. There are free and open images out on the web, by the way, that you can go and tap into. So don't forget that. You can use things that are licensed for you to use them, like on Flickr, for example. They have certain images that people do allow you to use for educational, non financial things, and even some that are licensed for you to use for whatever you want. So you can definitely use that kind of image. So that's why I have this section on copyright and fair use. Be sure that you aren't just ripping people's stuff out of Google Images and going in and changing the color on it and turning that in. Don't do that. You need to make sure that you are using, that you're authoring something in an ethical fashion. I've given you some potentially useful articles, some of them to get you in the mood of thinking of yourself as a teacher brand, others just on how you create logos and some tools that you can use to do so. And finally, for the deadline, you do have through Tuesday, February 2nd, the 2 days after the module was supposed to end, and you're going to want to upload your document to the Dropbox, and you're going to, and you can just paste your logo onto that Word document. You could also do it on like your blog. So you know how you're making the design notebook, design, multimedia design journal. You can actually create a new page, a new post on that, and you can actually submit it and put it online if you want, and do your writing on that, and then submit that link into the Dropbox. That's totally fine. It's actually my preference that you do it that way, but I didn't say that here, so you do it however you want. The other place you need to submit this is on the Peer Feedback Project 1 board. You're going to share your graphic and your write-up of it, and then you're going to go in and you're going to offer commentary on one classmate's project as well. So that's it for session 1. Thank you for your patience as I try to get a good class up for you that meets course objectives and that prepares you to do that work for the client that I talked about earlier, and just gives you increased skills in the area of multimedia development. All right, guys, thank you so much, and I promise not to make such a long video again in the future. All right,